The bloodthirsty chupacabra has been sighted in the new Diabolical Desert structure deck for my card game Cryptid Fates. Go to cryptidcardgame.com to pre-order now. Use the online deck builder or join the community at reddit.com/r/cryptidccg. Hello and good evening. I'm I'm Darkness Prevails. Old man, chubby narrator, werewolf abolitionist. Today I bring you another couple of juicy hours of Alone in the Woods, a podcast featuring allegedly true stories of terrifying encounters in the great outdoors, accompanied by natural soundtracks. You'll hear encounters about strange creatures, like something someone called the SKINRUNNER, and things that haunt the deepest and darkest woods. Enjoy episodes 63 and 64 of Alone in the Woods right here. If you enjoy what you hear, please find Alone in the Woods on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave the show a rating and a follow. Thank you. When you step into the wilderness, there's no telling what might be waiting for you just beyond the trees. From shadowy figures to ancient creatures lurking in the lake, the forest holds secrets we may never fully understand. Welcome back to Alone in the Woods. I'm Darkness Prevails, and I'm thrilled to share more true encounters that will make you think twice about those quiet walks in the woods. Before we begin, I want to mention my books Appalachian Folklore Unveiled and Phantom Phenomena, both available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you're interested in strange history, eerie legends, and stories that push the boundaries of reality, these books are for you. Tonight's episode features tales of unsettling beings that watch from the shadows, haunted cabins hiding dark secrets, and mysterious creatures that defy all explanation. If you've had an outdoor experience that still haunts you, head to eeriecast.com/outdoor to share your story. I'd love to feature it on the show. Now throw a log on the fire, because the night is still young. Creepy Guy in the Woods, from Anonymous. This story took place when I was about 11. So, yeah, it was a long time ago, but it still creeps me out every time I think about it. My friend and I were walking down my street and then decided to go into the woods by my house since we got bored. Now, just to get the picture into your mind, this place is half a farm field, half woods, with hay bales everywhere in the open parts of the field. Nothing happened when we walked through there, and we didn't expect anything to anyway. Fast forward to our way back from our walk. We got out of the woods fine, but something creepy happened in the open field. We were about halfway to getting back onto the road beside the field when we noticed an extremely tall man walking towards us with a hoodie on, and we couldn't see him that well because by this time it was getting dark. He must have not noticed us because when he looked up, he crouched down behind a hay bale with his head occasionally popping out from behind it. This immediately set off red flags, so I told my friend, who somehow didn't notice him. After we came up with a plan, we started walking towards the road. When I was in range of the hay bale, I took out my phone, fake calling my dad, who I pretended was a police officer. I made sure I talked loud enough for the man to hear and said this: "Hey Dad, how's your new police job going?" "Oh, that's great. You're parked beside the road right now?" "Okay, so once we get to the road, we'll hop right in." "Okay, yeah, that's nice." I just kept saying, "Yeah, okay," and stuff like that, pretending to stay in line with my fake police officer dad. Eventually, we passed the hay bale and noticed he was gone, and we heard some rustling in the nearby bushes. Our plan worked, and he ran away, thinking my dad was waiting in his police car. We then ran to my house and talked about what had just happened. She eventually went home, and we never saw that man again. To this day, I have no clue what that man was planning on doing, and what would have happened if I hadn't noticed that creep walking towards us. The long-necked lake creature, from King Dodo. This isn't one of my longer stories, but it's probably my most unexplained. This happened back sometime in 2017 or 2018, making me about 13 or 14 at the oldest. Me, my dad, and baby sister went on a fishing trip to this huge lake in Louisiana. I can't remember the name of the lake, sadly. Upon arriving, I rushed to claim my fishing spot, leaving my sister and dad to gather their gear and make their way over to me. It was a beautiful spot, a small cliff face overlooking the lake. It was one of the few actually nice and clear days, something I found in my time in Louisiana to be rare. Before setting my gear, I took a look out over the water, noticing what I thought to be a log at first. I stared at it for a moment before it popped back under the water, but this wasn't like a log sinking beneath the waves. This was like when you see a turtle's head bob underwater when it notices you looking at it for too long. But this was far too big to be a turtle, especially at that distance, and the neck was definitely too long. I guess the best way to describe it was it looked like pictures I've seen of Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. I want to state, all this took less than 60 seconds, and by the time my dad came over, it was gone. Of course, with how much I loved cryptids and the paranormal, my dad didn't believe me, thinking I was making it up, teasing me about it for the first half of the trip before finally getting annoyed at hearing me go on and on about it. I spent the rest of that trip hoping it would re-emerge, but sadly, it did not. I guess that's the whole story. I'd really love to know if anyone would know what this could be, or have seen anything like this in Louisiana. I know there's a lot of folk tales in that state, and this is far from the only story I have from there. The Cabin and the Journal, from Russell T.C. So, last fall, my friends Mark, Lisa, and I decided to take a weekend trip to a cabin in Colorado. We all worked together at a marketing firm in Denver, and after wrapping up a massive project, we thought it would be good to get away from the city and decompress. Mark had found this cabin rental online. Nothing fancy, just a cozy place tucked away in the Rockies. The pictures showed a rustic charm, and the reviews were decent, so we booked it. We left on a Friday afternoon, aiming to beat the weekend traffic. The drive was about 3 hours, and as we got closer, the roads became narrower and less maintained. The GPS signal flickered in and out, but we eventually found the turnoff, a dirt road partially hidden by overgrown bushes. "Are we sure this is the right way?" Lisa asked, peering out the window. "According to the map, it is," Mark replied, tapping the screen of his phone. I shrugged. Only one way to find out. We bumped along the dirt road for a couple of miles until the cabin came into view. It was older than the pictures suggested, with weathered logs and a sagging porch. But it had a certain charm, and the backdrop of pine trees and mountains was breathtaking. We unloaded the car and settled in. The inside was cozy enough. A small living room with a stone fireplace, a modest kitchen, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. There was no TV, but we brought board games and books, planning to disconnect for a few days. That first evening was relaxing. We cooked dinner together, shared a bottle of wine, and sat on the porch watching the stars. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant hoot of an owl. The next morning, while making coffee, I noticed a small door under the staircase, something I hadn't seen the night before. "Hey, did you guys see this?" I called out. Mark wandered over. "A closet, maybe?" I pulled the door open. It creaked loudly, revealing a narrow space filled with cleaning supplies, old coats, and a stack of dusty books. One of them caught my eye, a leather-bound journal with frayed edges. "Looks like someone's diary," I said, holding it up. Lisa joined us. Probably the owners. We shouldn't snoop. You're right, I agreed, but curiosity got the better of me. Flipping it open, I skimmed a few pages. The handwriting was neat, but faded, dated about 10 years earlier. Just take a quick look, Mark suggested. Might be interesting. I sat down at the kitchen table and began reading aloud. June 5th. I've been here a month now, and the solitude is both a blessing and a curse. The woods are peaceful, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. Sounds ominous, Lisa commented, half joking. I continued. June 12th. Last night I heard footsteps on the roof. Probably just animals, but it kept me awake. I need to patch that hole by the chimney. We laughed it off, but as I read further, the entries grew more unsettling. July 1st. The whispers started again. I can't understand what they're saying, but they're coming from the vents. I sealed them up, but it hasn't stopped. All right, that's enough, Lisa said, her tone more serious. This is creeping me out. Mark smirked. It's just someone's old journal. They were probably messing with future readers. I closed the book. Yeah, maybe. Still, it's weird. We spent the day hiking nearby trails and taking photos. The weather was perfect, and the fresh air felt rejuvenating. By the time we returned to the cabin, we were exhausted. That night, after dinner, we settled in the living room to play cards. The wind had picked up outside, and the trees swayed, casting shifting shadows through the windows. At some point, Mark got up to use the restroom. A few minutes later, we heard a thud upstairs. Mark, you okay? I called out. No response. Lisa glanced at me. Maybe we should check on him. We headed up the creaky stairs and found the bathroom door open, but there was no sign of Mark. Suddenly, he jumped out from one of the bedrooms, startling us. Gotcha, he laughed. Very funny, Lisa said, punching him lightly on the arm. We all chuckled and headed back downstairs. As we continued our game, I thought I heard a faint tapping noise. At first, I dismissed it as branches against the roof, but it became more rhythmic. Do you guys hear that? I asked. They paused and listened. The tapping continued, seeming to come from above. Probably just the wind, Mark said. But then it changed to a scraping sound, like something dragging across the roof. That's not the wind, Lisa whispered. I stood up. I'll go take a look. Be careful, she said. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The night was cold, and the wind bit at my face. Shining the light up at the roof, I couldn't see anything unusual. The trees around the cabin rustled, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement among the branches. See anything? Mark called from the doorway. Nothing, I replied, turning back toward the cabin. As I did, the flashlight beam caught something on the ground, a set of footprints leading around the side of the house. They were faint, but unmistakable. Guys, come here, I said. They joined me, and we followed the prints to the back of the cabin. They disappeared into the tree line. Could be an animal, Mark suggested. An animal wearing boots? Lisa pointed out. We exchanged uneasy glances. Back inside, we double-checked that all the doors and windows were locked. The mood had shifted, and we decided to call it a night. In my room, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the cabin seemed amplified. Around midnight, I heard whispering, a soft murmur that I couldn't make out. I sat up, straining to listen. It seemed to be coming from the air vent near the floor. I got up and knelt beside it. The whispering continued, completely unintelligible. A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from downstairs. I heard footsteps rushing in the hallway as Mark and Lisa emerged from their rooms. "What was that?" Lisa asked, her eyes wide. "Sounded like it came from the kitchen," Mark said. We cautiously descended the stairs. The kitchen light was flickering, casting erratic shadows. On the floor, the contents of a cupboard were scattered, pots, pans, and utensils strewn about. "Did an animal get in?" Lisa wondered aloud. "How? Everything's locked," I said. We searched the cabin but found no signs of an intruder. Feeling unnerved, we decided to stay together in the living room for the rest of the night. Morning couldn't come soon enough. Over breakfast, we discussed whether we should cut the trip short. "It's probably just some pranksters," Mark said. "Maybe locals messing with tourists." "Pranksters who can get into a locked cabin?" I countered. Lisa sighed. "I don't feel safe here." Mark hesitated. "All right, let's pack up and head back." As we gathered our things, I noticed Mark was acting strangely, distracted and distant. He kept glancing toward the woods outside. "You okay?" I asked him. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well," he replied without meeting my eyes. We loaded the car and were ready to leave when Mark suddenly said, "I forgot my wallet inside. Be right back." He went back into the cabin. Minutes passed, and he didn't return. "What's taking him so long?" Lisa asked. "I'll go check," I offered. I found Mark standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the fireplace. "Mark, what's going on?" He turned to me slowly. "We can't leave." "What do you mean?" He pointed to the fireplace mantel where the journal now sat open. "It says we can't leave." I approached cautiously. "It's just a journal, Mark. Someone's old ramblings." He shook his head. "No, it's a warning." I glanced at the pages. The handwriting was different, harsher, scrawled. The latest entry read, "They tried to leave, but the woods wouldn't let them. Now they're part of it." A knot formed in my stomach. "Did you write this?" He laughed, but it wasn't his usual laugh. "Why would I do that?" I backed away. "Come on, let's go." He grabbed my arm with a grip tighter than I'd expected. "We can't escape. It's already here." Fear coursed through me. "Mark, you're scaring me." Lisa appeared at the doorway. "What's happening?" "Something's wrong with Mark," I said. She looked at him, and her expression shifted to alarm. "Mark, let him go." He released me and stepped back, his eyes unfocused. "It's too late," he murmured. Without warning, he bolted out the back door and sprinted into the woods. "Mark!" we shouted, chasing after him. He was fast, disappearing among the trees. We called out, but there was no response. "We need to find him," Lisa said, panic rising in her voice. We spent the next hour searching, but there was no sign of him. Exhausted and frightened, we returned to the cabin to call for help. But of course, there was no cell signal. "Maybe we should drive to the nearest town and get help," I suggested. As we headed to the car, we found the tires slashed. Deep cuts rendered them useless. "This can't be happening," Lisa whispered, tears welling in her eyes. We were stranded. As dusk approached, we barricaded ourselves inside the cabin, pushing furniture against the doors and windows. The reality of our situation sank in. "Do you think Mark did this?" Lisa asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but something's not right." Night fell, and the whispers returned, louder this time, surrounding the cabin. Footsteps thudded on the roof, and shadows flickered past the windows. Huddled together, we tried to stay calm. Then, amidst the chaos, there was a knock at the door. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Let me in," came Mark's voice. We looked at each other. "Mark, what happened? Are you okay?" Lisa asked. "Please open the door," he repeated. I approached the door but hesitated. Something felt off. "What's the code word?" I asked, recalling a joke we had about using a code word during horror movies. There was a pause. "Just open the door," he said, more forcefully. "That's not Mark," Lisa whispered. "Who are you?" I demanded. Silence. Then a low chuckle that sent chills through me. We stayed awake all night as the noises continued, scratching at the walls, whispers seeping through the cracks, and that occasional haunting laughter. When morning light finally filtered in, the sounds ceased. Cautiously, we moved the barricades and stepped outside. The car remained, tires still slashed. There was no sign of Mark. We started walking down the dirt road, hoping to find help. After several miles, a ranger's truck approached. We flagged it down and explained everything. The authorities conducted a search, but never found Mark. They questioned us extensively, but there were no answers. Back in Denver, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. But the experience lingered. Lisa and I rarely talked about it, and our friendship with Mark remained an unresolved void. Months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was the leather-bound journal from the cabin. Flipping to the last page, I saw a new entry in Mark's handwriting. "I'm home now." It just watches. From Raven Reaps 2411. This happened to me about 2 to 3 years ago. My family and I had just moved to a town in the Midwest. For some context, we had lived in this town before and moved away for the previous year for my mom's work, and we were currently staying with my grandparents. It was around October, and the trees were bright with color this time of year, and it was starting to get chilly. The day I saw it was particularly nice out, which I still vividly remember. I was hauling out some boxes to our car so we could finally finish up the move to the new house when I saw it. Standing in the brush 10 feet in front of me was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. It was 7 to 8 feet tall. It had pits for eyes. The creature was so pale it looked white and was humanoid, standing on 2 legs. But you could tell it wasn't human. It was just staring at me. I was frozen, and it felt like forever where it was just watching me. Everything went silent, and it got cold, like the air was freezing. Then the thing turned around and ran into the woods. I finally got out of my trance and sprinted back into my grandparents' house, dropping the boxes I was carrying. I was terrified and freaking out. I couldn't rationalize what I just saw, but it definitely wasn't human. I ran to my parents' room in a state of panic. When my parents finally calmed me down and I explained what had happened, I heard the most terrifying thing that day. My parents had seen it too. At first, I thought they were joking, but my mom seemed very scared, and I knew they weren't joking because they wouldn't take it this far. At this point, all I knew was that I wasn't crazy, and I had seen something unhuman. My parents then explained both of their experiences with the creature, both extremely similar to mine. The creature just watches. To this day, I think that it could have harmed me if it wanted, but it didn't. All it did was watch. I still can't go to my grandparents' house without being afraid of what's in those woods. The Tree Trunk. From Katana. When I was in 7th grade, my parents and I would argue all the time because of my grades. I was not a particularly focused kid in class, so this happened frequently. One day, my parents and I were having one of these arguments when they decided it was time to really punish me. They grounded me for weeks, and I couldn't even see my friends except for at school. This really angered me, so one night I snuck out into the backyard. We have a forest in the back, and that's where I went. Something felt weird about the woods that night. I pushed it down, thinking it was just the thoughts in the back of my mind. I walked toward the entrance of the forest and saw an odd-looking tree trunk. The reason I'm saying it was odd is because it was darker than any of the other trees in the forest, and it seemed to be shaking. Once I noticed this, I didn't think it could be an actual tree trunk. I looked closer until the thing stood up, its joints cracking like snapping twigs. Its face was long and protruding. I yelled out, but was frozen in place. My mind was screaming for my body to move, but it couldn't. I helplessly watched as the thing inched closer. I could already feel those sharp, needle-like teeth digging into my flesh, but the sound of a gunshot pushed the thing back. I turned around to see my dad with his shotgun and my mother standing behind him, crying. As the creature slinked off further into the woods, I ran to my parents and hugged both of them tightly. Soon after, me and my family moved across the state. Unfortunately, we have a forest in our backyard, literally filled with tree trunks. The Book of Eeriecast, from The Famous Sandhogs. What I am about to share is true. It happened several years ago, and recently I was told I should share it with dark stories. I feel that I should start by explaining that I am a writer, freelance mostly. I've been published in several magazines, both online and offline, and I wrote The Book of Eeriecast. You've never heard of it before because it's never been published. It exists, handwritten, only as a manuscript. I haven't shown it to anyone, but I have shared the story that I'm about to tell you. My story about the Eeriecast begins with the desire to get away from the city. Every now and then, I feel the need to get away, leave Wi-Fi and cell service and social media far behind, and go into the wilderness. Find an isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere. No TV, no internet, just a book or two. A long drive up a winding gravel road, which narrows into two thin ruts barely wide enough for the car to pass through, branches scraping against the windows. The creak of worn stairs leading to an old screen door, a skeleton key, a bare-bones escape, a bed, a small kitchen, no running water, no electricity, a small wood furnace in the corner. It was perfect, I told my partner, and our dog could run wild, and I could work on my book. The book I was supposed to be writing was not yet even an idea, because I had no ideas for a book. This week-long vacation was also to be a kind of writer's retreat. Removed from the chaos of the city, I thought the words would flow. Immersed in nature, the words, the ideas, should come naturally. Although I am not Japanese, the Japanese have a name for this concept: Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. You're supposed to let the forest's rejuvenating greenness wash over you like rain. Deeply inhale the smell of cedar and spruce, the damp earthiness of a ring of mushrooms. Cleanse your mind in bird song and bug buzz. Eat wild raspberries by the handful. To spread your arms wide, close your eyes, and turn to the sun, to feel its red warmth bake your skin, to rekindle that primordial connection to nature. And hopefully, I thought, to rekindle that primordial connection to my writing. We unloaded the car, food, water, toilet paper, the basics, and I noticed a small path leading away from the north side of the cabin, opposite the small lake, which it overlooked. Our dog, Lou, a black terrier pug mix, waded into the water, drank and chased frogs while squirrels sounded alarm calls from their trees. And, as the drive was long and the day was fading, I started up the wood furnace. As night descended, loons called in the distance, fish plopped, rippling the water's glassy surface, and the fire crackled and popped, as all fires should. From my backpack, I pulled out a map. It was one I printed at home. The resolution wasn't great, but the satellite imagery showed the winding road, the lake, and the small cabin neatly tucked into a vast sea of trees. But even in the low light of the fire and the candles we had placed around the room, I could make out the trail that went north. It went up the hill, it seemed, and led to a clearing, or what I thought was a clearing, likely a 5-minute walk. I began to point this out to my partner when I noticed that she was already asleep, and so I blew out the candles and joined her. When I woke up the next day, early as is my habit, which is when I do most of my writing, the stove atop the furnace was still warm, so I tried to heat up some instant coffee in a small pot. But it was not hot enough. I then saw that we had used up all the wood the previous night. I would need to find more. I crept out the door, careful not to wake Lou, who had buried herself under a couch cushion, and looked for anything I could burn. But there was no wood under the stairs, none stacked near the outhouse, none piled anywhere that I could see. There was green wood. Yes, it was all around me, but I didn't want to fill the place with smoke. As I circled the cabin, I stopped on the north side. The path to the clearing lay before me, and I thought if I followed it, I could gather dried branches along the way. I say I thought, but looking back, the thought may not have been mine. I walked up the path through the forest, stopping only when I saw a suitably dry branch and snapping it into pieces over my knee. By the time I reached the clearing, I had more than enough wood to heat my morning coffee. I remember bending over and dropping the bundle onto the ground, and when I stood again, cracking my back like I'd been hunched over a computer all day. In the center of the clearing, I saw a large rock outcrop devoid of any trees or shrubs, a thin wisp of smoke being pulled into the sky. Moving closer, I saw the smoke came from a small fire pit. Stones, no larger than my fist, were arranged in a circle, the inside of which was full of ash. I held my open palm to the mound and felt its warmth. Someone had made a fire here. I looked around at the thick stands of balsam fir that grew where the rock outcrop dug under the soil. I couldn't see anyone, and so I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" I waited for a response, wondering if I should tell them that my partner and I, and our dog, were staying at the cabin down the path, the one by the lake. I heard no response, but I also remember not hearing anything. No birds, no loons or squirrels, no bugs or wind. The air was full of nothingness, like everything had disappeared and left behind a vacuum. I remember finding this peculiar, and it was the reason I repeated my calls. Hearing my questions echoing off the rock and trees was reassuring, and I no longer expected a reply. Whoever had lit the fire was long gone, and I reasoned that the fire, left to smolder, could likely have lasted quite a while if it had sufficient fuel. Perhaps the people staying here before had done it. Irresponsible, yes. Reckless, yes. But not unheard of. I stamped out whatever embers still clung to life in the mound of ash, and not completely convinced it was enough, undid my pants and urinated on it. The fire pit hissed at me and sent up large plumes of opaque smoke. I batted it away from my face, but could not help but inhale some of it, and I coughed and stepped back into fresher air. The smoke tasted sour, if that makes sense, like boiled blood or burning extension cords. It was a harsh smell, the kind that gets in your eyes, like molten glass splashed onto someone's skin. And that's when I saw them. The aeromati, although at the time I didn't know that's what they were called. A dozen of them, maybe more, surrounded me. They were small, hooded creatures. The light was still quite low, and at the time I wasn't sure if the hoods were clothing or a part of their bodies. Later, I learned they braided the long, sharp leaves of the plants that grow at the lake shore, and, together with mud and moss, they shrouded themselves in thick, vegetative cloaks. Their faces were impossible to see clearly, but I knew they weren't human. Vaguely rodent-like, I thought they were covered in thin black hair, like mole people covered in little needle-like leeches. I turned around, looking at each of them, and as I did, I noticed that they swelled slightly as they breathed. It would begin near the ground and travel up their body. It reminded me of how centipedes walk, how a wave of moving legs would sweep from one end to the other. They breathed like some kind of segmented insect. It is here that my memory begins to fail me. But there is one thing, one feeling that I remember, a feeling of which I will never forget. Fear, yes, I am sure I was terrified. I have a brief memory of yelling, but being unable to form any noise. The most terrifying thing was I could not express my fear. I was helplessly motionless. My body refused to do the most familiar thing it knew. I could not even close my eyes. At a time when I felt I needed it the most, my body abandoned me. My body gave itself to the Aramati. They moved toward me like slugs. Perhaps I still had some movement, because the next thing I remember was that I was lying on the ground. The forest splayed sideways across my vision. I could feel something pressing outward from inside my face, like long fingers were pushing behind my eyes, like I was a glove, and someone was trying me on, like someone or something was digging through my brain. There's a parasitic wasp that lays its eggs inside the bodies of caterpillars. The eggs hatch, they feed, they grow, from the inside out, and clever things that they are, they leave the caterpillar's brain for last. I felt like that caterpillar. I felt dull and empty, like a husk, like they stirred my brain into a slurry, and now they plan to suck it up in a straw. I am sure I felt other things, pain and panic, but I don't remember anything else. When I woke, they were gone. The fire was out. The sun hovered directly above me. Welts from mosquito bites bubbled like blisters on my hands, and I imagined my face too. I brushed myself off and staggered back to the cabin, afraid that my partner would have been worrying about where I'd been. What would I tell her? That I stood too close to a fire and passed out. That cloaked mole people opened me up as if I were a cadaver. She'd have to check the cooler to make sure I hadn't drunk all the wine. And to be honest, it felt like I had been drinking. I burst out of the path like I had been holding my breath and stumbled around the side of the cabin. My partner was loading the car. She had just closed the side door, having stuffed both our backpacks and the cooler onto the back seats. "Well, that's the last of it," she said when she saw me. "You still have your manuscript inside, by the way. It's on the table where you left it. You ready to go now?" "Go?" I asked her. "Home. Yeah, we leave today. You okay?" I felt her eyeing me suspiciously, like she thought I was trying to play a joke on her. "I thought we were here for a week." "Yeah, 1 week, not 2. She paused as if she was going to ask me something, but then thought better of it, and instead said, "Someone else probably has this place tonight. Grab your stuff and let's go. I'll drive and you can read me your story." "My story?" "Sorry, book." "Book? Seriously, are you okay? Do you want some water? We still have a couple bottles in the cooler." She helped me into the passenger seat, and as I drank the water, Lou jumped in beside me. I watched her enter the cabin in the side mirror, and she emerged a moment later, holding a large stack of loose paper. She lowered herself into the driver's seat, turned, and thrust the stack of papers, the manuscript, into my lap. "Your book," she said. I looked at the top page. In my handwriting it said, "The Book of Aramati." I flipped pages randomly. I wrote every page, all of it. All, 300 pages. Later, when I counted them, I saw it was 284. In 1 week. How could I not remember writing it when I clearly did write it? How could I not remember an entire week? To hear my partner describe what we did during the week, it certainly sounded like it was me. But I remembered none of it. What I do remember, I have described here. Waking in the morning, walking up the path to the clearing, the fire pit, and the Aramati, and my noiseless screaming. I have read through the Book of Aramati, my book, many, many times since. I read parts of it to my partner on the long drive home, and I could sense that she could tell I was reading it for the first time. It is a strange book, a book of history, a book of culture, a book of the ancient stories of the Aramati, the lonely ones. It is impossible here to relate how alien the book is. Although I have written it, I might as well not have. Whoever I was for that week, it was not me. Not the me that writes these words today. This is how it begins. The Aramati, the lonely ones, are the people of the lake. We are dead now, as one day you too will be dead. Herein lies our truths. Let these words mark our graves, for we are lonely no more. The book describes how the Aramati grew out of the bubbles of methane at the bottom of the lake, how they learned to breathe oxygen through the roots of plants, how they would weave filaments of algae into clothing. These are the hoods or cloaks they wear when out of the water. How there was once a great number of them, and how that great number was turned into a few. How they became the lonely ones. I have never published the manuscript, but it still exists. It's sitting next to me as I type this. I erased this next thought several times because after I typed it, it sounded superstitious. But I haven't shared the book with anyone except my partner, because I am afraid that that feeling of helplessness and distress that scared me that day, the day I remember, would spread to anybody who reads the whole book, that the disease that killed the Aramati, the disease that caused them to become the lonely ones, spreads not by viruses or bacteria, but by ideas, by words, potentially by the words that I wrote. Again, I know the thought is a silly one. The rational part of my brain knows it is a foolish thing to think. But the other half, well, let's just say that when it feels like someone reached into your brain, it's hard to know which part of your brain is which. I don't expect many people to believe me. I barely believe it myself. But I know what I remember, and I am honest about the parts that I don't. I don't remember writing the Book of Aramati, but I did, and there is much I do remember that I wish I didn't. An update. From Tegaori, Luca. So I posted a story previously describing my encounter during a military field trip with my cadets facility. I've come to share another encounter with what I assume was the same thing. I'm 18 now, almost 19. I live in a small town in the UK, and I recently graduated from college. There was a day I remember from before graduating, though, and it's making me rethink applying to the college for a second year. I stayed late, studying and finishing one of the units of my final. It was getting darker outside, and my tutor suggested I should head home and assured me I could come back tomorrow to finish it. I couldn't understand why, but I was hesitant to leave. I vividly remember the feeling of dread as I shut off my computer and packed my things. I didn't have any friends with me, and usually that doesn't bother me when I head home late. But today was different for some odd reason. I headed out into the corridor, which was empty by this time in the evening, and as I got out of the building, that sense of dread only grew worse. I looked around anxiously with every step I took, further and further away from the college, further and further from safety. I arrived at the bus station fine, and that strange feeling had all but disappeared. I got onto my bus around 10 minutes later, looking through the window and out into the dark woods that line either side of the road home. When I finally reached my stop and got off with only a few streets to walk down, that feeling came back. This time it was a lot stronger. My chest felt tight, and I could barely breathe. It felt like I was having an anxiety attack. "Hello!" This strange voice came from down a darker street. I felt my heart stop. I almost froze in my tracks. Was it someone who was lost? Maybe they needed some help. So, against everything my head screamed at me, I decided to approach a little. Hi?" I responded, wondering if this person needed directions or help. Hi?" Did it just mimic me? That was more than enough for me. I was already freaked out as it was. So I turned and continued walking toward my home. Hi," it repeated. I walked faster. Nope, this was not happening. "Hello?" No, my house came into view, and I felt my heart race with gratitude. I turned the corner towards home, getting my key from my pocket ready to unlock the door. "Hello." It sounded like it was right in front of me now. And there it was, right there, in my garden, that pale skin, the hollows of eyes, those huge hands. It was hunched in my garden near the gate, and eyes or no eyes, I knew it was looking at me. I didn't dare to turn away from it, backing away towards a streetlight, and when I could only make out its silhouette, I ran. Luckily, my friend only lived maybe half a mile from me. When I say I have never run for my life like that, I mean it. Not even with the encounter at Cadets. I knocked frantically when I reached my friend's house, staring out into the dim streets to make sure it wasn't chasing, and how thankful I was when my friend opened the door. She must have seen the panic on my face because she let me in and closed the door. I told her everything, and she comforted me. I stayed over for the night, and she went back to my house with me the next morning so I could get changed into clean clothes and do my hygiene routine. There were scratch marks in the dirt in the front garden that sent shivers down my spine when I exited my house. And it was terrifying to think, if I hadn't been so lucky as to have a friend living close by, those claw marks could have been on me. The Jasper Hill Incident. From Sean David. There's a place where lovers used to gather near my town. It used to be called Jasper Hill Park. Hill, as in mound of dirt. To my knowledge, it's not Jasper's last name, whoever he was. It's not the type of park that has swings either. It's a 5-mile chunk of forest with a hill near one end. Last time I've been there, the only road through it was overgrown gravel. That was years ago. I'm not even certain the hill or the park itself is still there. Hell, I'm not sure if I could find it. Never went back to that hill since the incident. I was 12. My uncle, his friend, and I were monkeying around with some walkie-talkies. We decided to go to Jasper Hill and test the local legends that the park was haunted. The story goes that if you are at the bottom of the hill and you blink a bright light, 2 headlights at the top of the hill will blink back. But if you tried to get closer, the lights would vanish. We believed that pranksters were the ones keeping the legend alive. A lot of folks claimed to see the lights with their own eyes. The plan was that I would be the one that blinked a light up the hill, while my uncle and his friend hid at the top. If someone was blinking headlights back down, they were going to jump out and scare the crap out of them. It seemed like a good idea at the time. We waited until 2 hours before sunset to head over there. We carried heavy handheld floodlight bright flashlights. My uncle and his buddy had their hunting camouflage on. The plan was to wait until 9 or 10 at night before blinking the light up the hill. Weather was not factored in, so we got soaked in a rain shower during the wait. A double beeping sound from the walkie-talkie told me that they were in a decent hiding spot and ready to start. I clicked on the light. 1 blink, 2, pause, 2 blinks, pause, wait. The walkie blipped, letting me know they saw my light from where they hid. A moment later, I see headlights. I beep the walkie-talkie. My uncle keys in, heavy static muffles his voice. Don't see anything. His buddy keys in. The static is even worse. All I can make out is the word, above. Above what? I ask. Silence. I try again. Above what? I ask again. The walkie kicks on. Strange noises come through, like a radio set between 2 static stations. The lights unify into one super bright one. The insect noises around me suddenly stop. I notice the wind is building up. I'm nearly blinded as something colossal swoops low through the night sky. The wind following behind it knocks me over. The silence that followed its disappearance was not natural. I try the walkie-talkie to check on my uncle and his friend. The batteries were completely dead. I began walking up the hill, calling my uncle's name. I found both of them standing at the foot of the hill, the exact opposite side of where I had been standing, both dazed and scared silly. Walking back home was an ordeal. Not only were the batteries of the walkie-talkies dead, so were the batteries of the flashlights. No one wanted to talk about what we had seen that night. And to the best of my knowledge, neither my uncle nor his buddy ever went back to that hill. Forest Story. From Anonymous. I live in a small town in Ohio, and my grandparents live in Tennessee, so one summer we decided to go down there to visit. I was 17 at the time, and I am now 26. I have listened to a million of these stories and have taken precautions to prevent such things from happening to me, but in the end, I still ended up with a mental scar. We took the 8-hour drive to my grandparents and arrived at around 6 in the afternoon. My grandparents live on a small mountain that has woods behind it, and even further back, there is an abandoned house on the very top of the mountain with an amazing view. The original owner of the house built it underground with a windmill to power his house. He later died due to the mold that built up, since he didn't follow the building codes and regulations. His house has been abandoned ever since then. At that age, I was a bad kid. I generally did anything my parents told me not to do. So before this story started, I took some pills from my grandparents' medicine cabinet. At this point, I decided it would be fun to go up to the mountain to smoke a cigarette or two before bed. Granted, it was midnight when I decided to go to the abandoned house. Because there weren't enough bedrooms for us all, I had to sleep on the ground floor. I could easily leave through the garage door without waking anyone. I started my quest by going through the house and grabbing a knife my grandpa had on his garage desk and a flashlight. I made my way to the house through the woods and finally reached the house after about 30 minutes. Once I got to the house, I immediately headed towards the windmill to climb the stairs to the top to smoke. I climbed the stairs and began to smoke. I sat up there until I finished my cigarette and enjoyed the lights I could see from the town by their house. As I sat there enjoying my view, I heard what sounded like a creak on one of the stairs that led up to where I was. Since I was already paranoid, I figured it was my imagination, but then I heard it again, and I was paralyzed. Even as I write this, my eyes begin to water. I heard footstep after footstep. I didn't know who or what it was. considering I was trespassing on another person's land. The footsteps continued up and kept getting faster. At this point, I was so terrified I'd forgotten I had a knife. Then the footsteps just stopped out of nowhere. I waited for what seemed like hours, but it was probably just a matter of minutes to begin to descend the windmill. I started going down and saw nothing as I took each step, one at a time. Once I finished the descent down the windmill, my heart began to beat normally. I made my way away from the tower and past the house. As I passed the house, I heard a creak, like a person stepping on a wood staircase. I have been in the house before, during the day, but never at night, so I knew that the stairs are, in fact, wood. I looked back to see the staircase that leads up from the house's front door, with a shape that resembles a human head just looking over. Now I cannot stress to you how terrified I was. Even now, my eyes tear up just writing this story. I stood there, just staring at this human head in fear. All I could tell was that the person was looking at me due to the reflection of the moon in their eyes. They saw me staring at them and said, "You are on my land." At this moment, I literally wet myself, and I watched as I saw this person walking up the staircase. I don't know if it was the adrenaline or what I had taken, but I acted on the idea this person was going to kill me, and I ran directly towards them, covering 20 feet in what seemed like 1 second. I tackled them with the knowledge I had to stop them to stay alive. We rolled to the bottom of the staircase and to the front door of the house, where there were mason jars, empty cans, and other rubble you'd find at an abandoned house like glass and rocks. I grabbed a mason jar and smashed it into this person's face. It was only then that I remembered I had my grandfather's knife. I pulled it out and began to stab this person until they were no longer fighting me. I stood up and ran back up the staircase. I then proceeded to run back to my grandparents' house, where I made sure every door and window was locked. I then took 3 more pills, took a shower that covered the shower floor with blood as it washed off me, and fell asleep. I woke up the next morning feeling terrible. My dad asked if I wanted to ride the 4-wheeler up to the house to climb the windmill at 1 in the afternoon and look at the house, which I declined, knowing very well what we would find. He rode the 4-wheeler back to the house and came back 2 hours later. My grandma asked him how it was, and he told us that he went into the house and up the windmill, and that everything looked fine, and the view was amazing as always. No blood or evidence of a fight, just a regular abandoned house. This means I either hallucinated the entire night or everything was cleaned up after I ran from the house. We drove back to Ohio that day, and on the ride, all I could think of is that this person is still alive and wants me dead. I have since moved out of my parents' house, and I am in medical school to become a doctor. I own my own house, which I share with my wife. I don't know what I thought that night, but I have been terrified to sleep alone ever since. I have been to my grandparents every year since, and have not gone back to the abandoned house. I am proud to admit I am drug and smoke-free. Let my story be a lesson to those who don't understand what can happen to them. My story may not make sense, but you need to understand there are things that can hurt you, and will, if you give them the chance. I just got lucky and happened to have a weapon on me. I don't know what I saw that night, if anything, but whatever it was, it disappeared without a trace. I hope to never see what I saw that night, and I hope no one has to go through what I went through. In the woods, where shadows stretch long and secrets run deep, you might find things that aren't meant to be seen, things that will haunt you long after you leave. Welcome back to Alone in the Woods. I'm Darkness Prevails, and tonight I'm bringing you a collection of true encounters with beings and forces lurking just out of sight. This episode is filled with stories that will make you rethink the quiet of the wilderness, from eerie figures hiding among the trees to strange, menacing creatures that seem to watch your every move. If you've had your own haunting outdoor experience, share it with me at eeriecast.com/outdoor. It could be featured in a future episode. And if you're enjoying these stories, please consider leaving a rating or review on Apple or Spotify. It helps keep the stories coming and lets others know where to find their next scare. Now, throw a log on the fire, because the night is still young. It lives in the trees. From Amber Flame. I'm a teacher from India. This is not my direct experience, but one I heard from a colleague and friend. When I was 21, I was offered an internship by an NGO to teach at a school in a very remote rural area. The internship was for 2 months, and the school was basically just one building with 2 classrooms and a mixed cohort of tribal children from nearby villages. It didn't pay much, but they put me up in a decent guest house about 1 kilometer away from the school and gave me a stipend for meals and other expenses. Saying this place was remote was an understatement. It was in the middle of a lush subtropical forest with barely discernible roads. There was hardly any network, and the only way to contact anyone was to walk to the nearest village, which was almost 3 kilometers away, for a few bars. But the guest house was stocked. It came with a caretaker who stayed in an outhouse right behind and handled food and other miscellaneous activities. And thankfully, I had a few other interns staying with me, along with the project supervisor. The supervisor, let's call him M, was an older man in his late 30s who had spent over a decade with the organization. He had been coming to that place to teach every year for a long time and was quite familiar with the community. A couple of days into the internship, the group decided to get together and get to know one another a bit more over dinner. We were going to be there for 3 months after all. One of us asked him to share his experience of doing this over several years. He had some fond memories with his students and a few more with the villagers. But he then decided to share an extremely scary experience he'd had in the woods. I'll be telling this story from his perspective. This happened the 2nd year that I had volunteered to teach and was at the very same guest house. Back then, there was only one other intern working along with me, and she was to join about a week later. Being the night owl that I am, I was almost always up at night, reading something or walking around the house. One night, I stepped outside to have a smoke. As I stood there admiring the moon, the sound of critters bringing in a sense of peace, I heard a few branches rustling nearby. Just as I turned, there was a giggle, like that of a small girl, and the sound of footsteps running away into the forest. What was a child doing in the woods at this hour? Was she lost? Concerned, I called out. Silence. Just when I was debating whether I'd imagined it, there was a loud shriek from that direction. There was a lost child there indeed. I didn't think to inform the caretaker. Someone was potentially in trouble. I made my way through the thicket of trees, trying my best to follow the direction the shriek had come from. It was quite dark, but the moon lit the way enough for me to vaguely make out the path in front of me. I walked for maybe 200 meters and stood there, unsure where to go. I didn't want to get lost myself in this whole rescue mission. I called out to the girl but got no response. As I contemplated what to do next, a rustle on a tree to my left made me jump. I looked up the tree to see the most horrifying thing ever. Perched on a branch with a wide grin was something. It was a translucent humanoid thing, almost like a specter with a sickening body. It had long, skinny arms and unusually long legs that dropped down. It swung its legs back and forth while eyeing me. Its eyes were a menacing white, and they pulsated against its skeletal, sunken-in face. I was absolutely terror-stricken, rooted to the ground. It was like my mind could not process what was in front of me, but my body knew and was trying to react, but couldn't. The devilish spirit raised its arms to grab another branch on top. It swung its body like that of a monkey, about to maybe come at me. I thought my time was up. This is where I'd die, killed by a tree spirit in the middle of nowhere. By some turn of luck, the specter didn't attack. It let out a frustrated grunt and slowly slunk behind the trunk of the tree. That's when my mind yelled at me to run. I didn't want to hang around to find out if the spirit would reemerge on the other side. I booked it out of there, the whole way back just a huge blur of running through branches until the house came into view. M's eyes watered a bit as he said this, the memory so fresh in his mind, like a deep scar. He continued, I woke up the next day with a low-grade fever. I was still shaking from the ordeal and didn't even want to get up out of bed. I sent word to the caretaker to cancel lessons for the day, and he went to the school to let the children know. Once he came back, he made me some warm tea and sat with me, asking me how I was feeling. He could sense that something was wrong. I was still super on edge and shaking. He encouraged me to talk about what happened, and I told him. Feeling quite stupid when I described the whole thing, I was sure he'd tell me to get myself checked, that I'd maybe caught something there that made me hallucinate the whole thing. What he told me, though, left me flabbergasted. He took a deep breath, looked me in the eyes, and solemnly said, Sir, I think you encountered a Vetala. I'd read stories of the Vetala, an undead spirit of a corpse that was part of a very famous fictional narrative in the literature of India. A king, Vikram, was said to be haunted by a Vetala, which would tell him stories, and at the end, ask him tricky questions to test his caliber as a noble and wise ruler. And every time, the king would prove his mettle, showing that he was a worthy ruler after all. But these were just stories. There wasn't an ounce of me that ever thought such a thing could exist. What? I managed to sputter. He nodded. You saw a Vetala. They usually live in the trees and lure lonely travelers by mimicking others. Not many of us have seen one, though. We never travel alone in the forest after dark for the fear of encountering one. He frowned a bit, as though thinking seriously. Once you see a Vetala, it would possess you. Vitalas jump and cling to a person's back, staying with them for the rest of their lives, bringing great misfortune and ruin. I wonder how you saw it disappear in the trees and came back unharmed. I was struggling to breathe at this point. I gulped. My throat suddenly became so dry. The caretaker looked at me again. Do you have any religious or spiritual artifact with you? He asked. Like what? Anything sacred or blessed. I pulled out a thread with a Rudraksha bead that I always had on since I was a child. I'd had it on for so long, I'd even forgotten it was there. Rudraksha beads are associated with Lord Shiva and are said to be powerful. They're somewhat similar in terms of spirituality to rosary beads that Christians use. The caretaker nodded knowingly. That's what saved you, he said. When M finished his story, he was absently fiddling with the Rudraksha bead that hung from a chain on his neck. He sighed and smiled at us, telling us how it all felt so surreal so many years later. He also warned us never to go in the woods alone after dark, and to always go in pairs or as a group, no matter what. We definitely needed the warning. I never experienced anything like that, and the 3 months of my internship were quite good. But if you're ever in a forest in India, alone after dark, lured in by something inexplicable, do not venture. The Altar in York, from Silver Bullet 54. People always say never to explore the forest, as there are terrifying things. Sadly, despite multiple bad incidents, I can't beat my sense of adventure. One of my more recent daytime excursions led to something that I want to forget, but can't. It happened in March of 2020. Since no one was out due to COVID-19, I was bored out of my mind, so I decided to take a drive. I settled on York in deep southern Pennsylvania. I heard a story about the 7 gates of hell and decided to see if any part of the story was true. Unfortunately, other than the first gate being visible during the day, nothing else was true. I didn't see any of the other 6 gates during the day or night. Instead, the night brought a much different terror. I ended up getting lost due to my own stupidity and didn't know where I was. I took out a small flashlight that I had with me and aimed the beam straight ahead. I saw an animal skeleton in front of me and screamed so loud I probably could be heard by anyone outside the woods. I also made the dumb decision to look at the ground. I saw red and black candles, bloody animal corpses, bones, decapitated chickens, and a pentagram. In other words, I had stumbled upon a Satanist altar. I always thought they were rumors, but apparently there's more to those stories. I heard branches cracking and quickly hid behind a log. When I peeked over it, I saw 11 hooded figures. They all looked around at their area like they knew someone had trespassed and had messed with their space. I hadn't touched or moved anything, so they eventually shrugged and started to chant. I knew it was German but couldn't decipher it. But 3 words I looked up to be evil, flame, and devil. I crawled for a few minutes until their fire couldn't be seen and I couldn't hear them talking. I immediately broke into a run back to my car and sped out of there. The next day, I retraced my steps. I walked past the altar again and saw something that made me freeze. There were 12 robes, even though I was sure I had seen 11 people. There were also an upside-down cross and a beheaded crucifix. So it turns out that investigating the woods is a bad idea. After, I didn't really go on any walks alone or at all due to the pandemic. Now I think fate might have been telling me to stay home. I'm afraid that if I don't, there will be another occasion when I stumble upon an altar, or who knows what else. The Booming, from The Creator's Guardian. This event occurred around 13 and a half years ago. I was 13 at the time, and I lived, with my parents, in a brick house that is just outside a large wooded area. Now, many of my sightings and encounters have happened in these woods. I don't know whether this area is sacred to monsters of all shapes and sizes, or they just hate me. At around 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I was suddenly awakened by a massive boom from outside the house, to my right. From my position, the bed faces west, and to my right was our work shed man cave. Right in front of that shed is a large chicken coop. I jumped out of bed and ran to a window in our rec room that faces east, and there was nothing there. Just as I turned around, another incredibly loud noise disrupted the calm forest. I panicked for a moment, but then logic began to take over. Maybe it was the high school, I thought. We live near a high school that fired a cannon when their football team scores a touchdown. There was no way a single cannon could possibly be that loud. Plus, the cannon was 4 miles away, so even if it did make an unusually loud noise, it would just sound like a small, distant boom. This boom sounded like someone was setting off fireworks 2 inches from my ears. I stared at the ground, occasionally glancing at the clouds. There were small tufts of cloud here and there, but nothing that could make a lightning strike and a resounding thunder. My mind then went to its illogical side trying to explain the boom by thinking of paranormal reasons behind it, until I thought of something I'd recently heard about. Skyquakes. It must be skyquakes. Skyquakes are loud booms and crashes that seemingly originate in the sky. Their existence is in question, but there have been reports and videos. Did I hear a skyquake? Later that day at around 3 p.m., I checked the flights over my area at that time. I was able to do this by just accessing a website. There was no air activity that night for some random reason. On Sunday at 4 a.m., I sat inside, looking out my window, waiting, hoping, praying that I would see what caused this boom the previous morning. I will never forget this part for as long as I live. An orb of light descended from the sky for about half a second, shook violently, then ascended very quickly. It took a while for the sound waves to reach me, but I heard a loud crashing boom. If anyone can explain this orb and how it caused this boom, please tell me. I am dying to know to this day what it was. Wendigo encounter while fishing. From Bones. I decided to go bass fishing at one of my spots at the Titan River in the afternoon, hoping to catch something big. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows through the dense trees. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional splash of a fish jumping. As I made my way deeper into the woods, I found a secluded spot by the river. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink hues of the sky. I cast my line and waited, enjoying the peaceful solitude. But as the light faded, an eerie feeling began to settle over me. The woods grew darker, and the usual sounds of nature seemed to vanish. I heard a snap of a twig behind me. I turned quickly, but saw nothing. My heart started to race. I told myself it was just an animal, maybe a deer. But then I heard it again, closer this time, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. I slowly backed away from the river, keeping my eyes on the darkening forest. Then a foul smell hit me like copper and death. It was overwhelming, making me gag. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers in the dim light. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, and it moved with an unnatural grace. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran, branches whipping at my face and arms. I could hear it behind me, its footsteps light but relentless. I stumbled and fell, my fishing gear scattered around me. Desperation took over as I tried to get to my feet, but the thing was already upon me. It grabbed at me with long, branch-like fingers. I could feel its breath on my neck, hot and rancid. I scrambled backwards before I remembered the flare gun on my side. I managed to grab it and fired. The bright light and heat made it recoil, giving me just enough time to break free and run. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I jumped in and sped away, my heart pounding. I survived, but I'll never forget those glowing eyes and that smell of copper and death. When I finally got home, I locked all the doors and windows, still shaking from the encounter. I tried to calm myself down, but every little noise made me jump. I couldn't sleep that night, the image of its gaunt frame haunting my thoughts. I knew I had to tell someone, but who would believe me? The woods, once my peaceful escape for fishing and leisure, now felt like a place I could never return to. The next morning, I decided to do some research on things said to prowl these woods. I found countless stories and legends about the Wendigo, each more terrifying than the last. I realized how lucky I was to have survived the encounter. Determined not to let fear control me, I vowed to return to the woods one day, better prepared and more cautious. But for now, I need to recover from the trauma and find solace in the fact that I had lived to tell the tale. I also reached out to my native uncle to share what had happened. He listened intently and then shared some ancestral wisdom and rituals to protect myself from such entities. His guidance and reassurance provided a sense of peace and a plan for any future encounters. Ghost figure while fishing, from Tramcam 435. It was a foggy morning on the lake, the sun barely breaking through the dense mist. My buddy and I had been out fishing for hours, casting our lines into the murky water, trying to catch something worth keeping. As the day wore on, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. Out of nowhere, a chill ran down my spine as I felt a strange presence watching us from the shadows. I shook it off as nerves, blaming it on the eerie atmosphere. But then, my friend let out a gasp, pointing towards the water. I followed his gaze and saw a figure slowly emerging from the depths, its eyes glowing red in the dim light. Panic gripped me as I saw the ghostly apparition, its form twisted and distorted, as if it had been trapped under the water for centuries. I could somehow feel its malevolent energy radiating towards us, causing my hair to stand on end. Without a word, my friend and I reeled in our lines and started paddling back to shore as fast as we could. But the figure followed us, its haunting wail echoing across the water. I could feel its icy touch on my skin, a sensation that chilled me to the bone. As we reached the safety of the shore, I turned back to look at the lake, but the apparition had vanished, leaving only ripples in its wake. My friend and I looked at each other, both of us shaken to the core by our encounter. We packed up our gear in silence, never speaking of the terrifying specter that had haunted us that day. From that moment on, I never ventured out onto that lake again, haunted by the memory of that ghostly figure lurking beneath the surface. And I always wondered what would have happened if we had stayed a moment longer, tempting fate and facing the wrath of that otherworldly presence. Earth in Tentacles, from The Australian Sun. It was an early autumn morning in the town of Atherton, Australia. It was probably around 7:35 a.m. I was 12 years old and was waiting at my bus stop, a small grassy field on the corner of my street. For the sake of anonymity, I will call it L Street, and my friend will be P. As I was standing in the field, a family walked past me, and this is important. They continued walking up the hill. I looked over to a small thicket of forest, and there I saw them. 3 or 4, maybe even 6 tall black tentacles, seemingly one with the mist. I took off my glasses to see if they were playing tricks on me, but sure enough, they were still there. They were near a swamp where teenagers had done rituals in the 70s. They were black, pure black, and there was no light in them. I walked up to the family and pointed at the tentacles, asking if they saw them. They said no, they couldn't see anything. I walked back to my bus stop and started cleaning my glasses and blinking. Sure enough, they were still there. I got onto the bus and continued staring at them as I was talking to the driver. My friend P asked me what I was looking at, and I told him it was fine. I was looking at nothing. When I got back to the bus stop that afternoon, I looked over at the spot where they had been, but they were no longer there. I know this isn't the creepiest experience, but I have many more I am willing to share. If anyone knows what these things were, feel free to reach out to me. And remember, not everything paranormal is bad. Horror in the Georgia Swamp Woods, from Deer Hunter. The morning of November 12th, 2022, was like any other for someone like me. I woke up, slurped down some coffee, and headed to my deer stand. This particular stand is one that I called the ghillie stand because it had some brush that looked like a ghillie suit surrounding it. The same day, I took my girlfriend, who I'll call C, out with me. This was not her first time hunting, so I dropped her off at her own stand. About an hour into the hunt, I started hearing the weird noises. Now, if you've ever hunted or explored the woods, you know that there is a certain time in the morning when the woods come alive. You hear birds, squirrels, turkeys, and the occasional coyote. But this was like something I've never heard before. Strange, guttural screams far off, or so I thought. You know how I mentioned the woods coming alive? Well, this morning that strangely never happened. It was just quiet, except those horrible gut-wrenching screams. After another 30 or so minutes, I could have sworn I heard my girlfriend say my name behind me. But when I looked, I saw no one. It was the weirdest thing ever. The next thing I heard was footsteps. I looked to my side, and about 100 yards away, I saw what I thought to be a nice deer. But when I looked through the scope, I saw something that looked like a deer that hadn't eaten in years, and a pale lavender-like color with elk-like horns. Before I could even think, this horrible creature stood up on its back legs and let out that horrible scream. At this point, I had it. I shot this creature, and it had no apparent damage. Next thing I know, it was barreling through the woods, knocking down everything in its path. As soon as it left, I got down from my stand and ran to my ATV, picked up my girlfriend, and we went home. I also confirmed she never got down from her stand, so who knows what I heard say my name. I still hunt all the time, but never at that location again. To that horrible creature, let's never meet again. What was it I seen hunting? From Fangle and Friends. I was with my dad and grandpa, and we went elk hunting for the weekend. When we got to our property, me and my dad went out that night, looking to see if we could find any elk. I was just staring out the window, listening to a podcast and music. At some point, we did see a fenced-off area. I thought it was weird, but ignored it. I was talking about skinwalkers and wendigos when me and my dad started to drive back to camp. It was dark when we got back. We saw my grandpa sitting outside the trailers. I had dinner and sat by the fire. I saw shadow figures, so I went to the trailer, then stayed in there for the night. Next morning, we got up at 5 a.m. We set out again with my grandpa. That day, as we were driving on the dirt road, I saw something in the trees. We stopped, hiked to a spot, and sat down. We saw some deer. I watched the deer for a bit, then I opened the beef jerky. That's when things went silent. I did have a feeling someone or something was watching me, but I ignored it. We went back. I was texting my girlfriend that I saw shadow figures when we started to head back that night. Same thing again, but in a different spot. I swear I heard a voice saying in my girlfriend's voice, even though she was at home. I heard the voice say, "Milo, come here. I have something for you." I looked out the window. Nothing. I had a feeling that something was following me. Then I heard the voice again, saying, "Come here, babe. I won't hurt you." After that, I had an uneasy feeling for the rest of that hunting trip. That is not the first time I have experienced something like that. I honestly don't know what it was. I will post an update if anything like this happens again. What the Freak? From Freaky Farm Farmer. This happened a while ago when I was 17. It has taken me a while to recover from what happened to me. I lived on my parents' farm, where I helped them out for some cash. For story information, I will explain what the area around my house looks like, as this is where I had my encounter with what I believe to be a wendigo. It was the 18th, and it happened at about 7:30. I was mowing our yard around the house, which, when put together, could add up to about 2 football fields. The yard wasn't shaped like that, but that was the size of it, roughly. One side of the yard faces a road that is used somewhat often. Most of the time it was used by farmers driving their tractors to plow, plant, or spray in other fields. Every other side was surrounded by tree lines. I usually mow the yard with my dad. However, one of the mowers broke down the last time we mowed, and I didn't quite know how to repair a mower yet. So I offered to do the mowing for him. He said he would pay me $20 if I did a good job. I had both of my AirPods in my ears and was listening to Morgan Wallen. I had them turned to the max volume so I could hear the music over the motor. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw a cougar. I saw it was skinny. It also looked hungry. Cougars attacking humans is rare, but what if it was hungry enough to kill me? I took my AirPods out and slowed the engine to watch what it would do. Then wham! A long, lanky, skinny, pale figure crashed into the cougar and started ripping and tearing at it. I didn't stay long. I started the engine back up and drove away as fast as I could, with the setting sun starting to cast shadows over the field. I reached the shop where we parked the mowers, and I turned the engine off. My dad was inside, and after I turned the engine off and ran inside, then, in my dad's voice somewhere in the distance, I heard, "Come here, I found a dead cougar. Come look." I ran inside and locked the doors. When it was time for bed that night, I made sure to keep a shotgun by my side. I've never encountered it again, and I hope it stays that way. As I said in the beginning, I'm pretty sure it was a Wendigo. So be wary at night and always pay attention to your surroundings. It might save your life. I was lucky that it caught the cougar. Otherwise, I could have fallen prey to the Wendigo. The SKINRUNNER, from Edward Jones. I'm from Abilene, Texas. It's a big town, and I have never heard of skinwalkers or Wendigos in this area. I have lived here since I was 15, and I am 21 now. I used to be a bad child when I was younger and would always get into trouble. When I was 16, me and my brothers wanted to gather up a few friends and go down to the creek behind a Dollar General in a part of town that's called the Four-Way. That day, I had gone to the academy and stole a CO2 airsoft revolver to take with us. When it got dark, me and my brothers and a few of our friends, who I will keep anonymous, left the house and started heading to the creek. We were all joking around and laughing about things that we have done in the past. And as we got there, there's a tunnel that drains water all the way underneath the city with a drainage culvert that leads to the creek. As we were walking alongside it, I was shining my flashlight around, looking to see what all was there, because homeless people like to camp at the end. We got closer to the end, and I shined my light on a figure that looked like a person that was crouched down and was eating something. When the light hit the creature, it stood up and was really tall, pale white, and very skinny. It looked at us, and its eyes reflected off my flashlight, making them glow yellow. It took off running into the woods faster than anything I have ever seen. We all got really spooked and turned around and ran back up to the main road where the houses were, which was about 250 yards away, not too far from the tree line. To this day, I have seen things that I can't explain, from UFOs to weird noises in the sky that you can't see, even with it being a non-cloudy day. I've heard countless other stories from friends about seeing dog-like creatures that can walk on their hind legs and eat cattle. I know what I saw, and to this day, I have not stepped foot in that area since. Was that a Wendigo? From Anonymous. This happened a few years ago to a good friend of mine, and it shook me. Basically, my friend was out with his grandfather after it was dark. His grandfather was an experienced hunter, so my friend didn't much worry about wild animals. So they were out walking the woods by his house, looking for deer. Then they smelled something rotten and disgusting. It was so bad he described it like a skunk spray mixed with dead animals. Then they followed the smell. As they did, it kept getting worse than anything he'd ever smelt before. Then he heard a voice that sounded like his mother, but deeper. Confused, he asked his grandfather, "Was that Mom?" But his grandfather shook his head, saying, "That couldn't have been because she was inside cooking." They started walking back in the opposite direction they heard the voice from. Suddenly the smell was gone, and the woods went quiet. His grandfather knew that this meant there was a large predator there in the woods, so they picked up their pace before he noticed this big, what could have been 10 feet tall black figure in the distance. It appeared to be just staring at them. As they got back to the house, it was standing at the tree line, closer now, unmoving and still staring. As his grandfather called out, asking who was there, he shined a flashlight in its direction. Whatever it was took off running into the woods and swinging on the tree branches before disappearing into the darkness. I hope my friend never sees this creature again. I Wasn't Alone, from Jack Aguirre. I was always an outdoorsy kid. I would pretend to hunt and play deer calls on my speaker, and would regularly see does and bucks, as well as other small game. I've seen some coyotes but scared them off when they got too close to my house. I could easily get back inside if I saw anything too big. We lived in Illinois, surrounded by farmland, but my house backed up to a tree line, then a cornfield, to a thick forest. I've always loved deer calling, and was out one night. I had my dad's big light, and was calling for deer, and would flash the light every so often to see if I could see any pair of eyes looking at me. When I flashed the light, I got this eerie feeling as I heard tree branches snapping right above me. I instantly turned off my flashlight and looked up, and something ran off. I shined my flashlight while it was running to the thick woods, and once I flashed the light, it paused. It was on all fours. What happened next is engraved in my mind. It stood up on its hind legs. Its legs were bent very weirdly, and I noticed it was about 7 to 8 feet tall easily. When it turned around, I couldn't move. This thing had eyes that were dark and felt like it was stabbing my stomach just with its stare. It had antlers but sharp teeth. Its fur was bloody, and I could see its ribs through its pale skin, and it started walking towards me. I finally snapped out of my trance and let out a scream. Thankfully, my older brother heard me and ran out to me. That thing seemed to get angry and let out a deep, low growl, but it was as loud as a scream. My brother picked me up and carried me inside, and he asked me what that thing was. I said that I didn't know, and that I'd never seen anything like it before. Later that night, I was trying to sleep, and I'm on the second story of my house, and I heard tapping on my glass. I peeked out of my blinds, and that thing was inches away, staring in. I screamed again, and my dad came in. When I looked back, it was gone, and I have yet to see this thing again. When it grabbed me, from Queen Bee. I need to give some insight before I tell my story. I'm a Native American from Washington State. My family consists of my parents, my 2 brothers, we will call them Wes and Leon, and myself. I'm the youngest and only daughter, so my brothers took it upon themselves to toughen me up, but it was basically just bullying me in various ways. They are 4 and 5 years older than I am, so this bullying happened throughout my life until they got into high school. In the summertime where we live, it can get scorching hot as soon as the sun is up. Being as it's really dry since we don't get much during summer, it can be utterly unbearable. Our only relief from the blistering heat was when our parents would take us to the lake to swim. But before this, we had to finish our chores. On this particular morning, Mom woke us up at 7 a.m. She has to yell at my brothers to rouse them from their sleep comas. My brothers split their chores of washing dishes, mopping floors, cleaning their room. They shared a room, cleaning the bathroom and taking out garbage. My chores consisted of changing the litter box, sweeping floors, picking up clothes, garbage, and cleaning my own room. So, I started on my room first, since it seemed easiest. There wasn't much on the floor but a few pieces of clothing, some toys, and books. I took 10 extra minutes to organize my things before moving on to the other things. After discarding the used litter in the outside garbage can, I walked back to the house to continue. We had the front door and windows open to help with the heat. As I walked just inside, I'm met by Leon screaming in my face. Leon yells, "What the hell are you doing?" Being startled and confused, I reply with, "Throwing the litter away." He continues berating me. "We are waiting on you so we can mop the damn floors." Now I'm completely perplexed because my brothers drag ass every time we have to do our chores. The earliest we've ever left the house to go swimming was by noon. We have only been up for an hour, so how could they have already finished doing all their other chores? It was completely hard for me to believe, since I normally finished first. Being as I was silent for far too long, and he got tired of waiting for a response, he shoved me to the floor and continued yelling at me to hurry up and clean the floors. I got up and started picking up the big garbage. Since I didn't get a chance to look at my surroundings, I didn't notice that they had swept all their garbage and dirt into the living room. I'm standing in the living room, fuming from the huge garbage pile that wasn't there earlier. Leon, leaning on the doorway to their room, smirks at me and says in a cocky voice, "Well, hurry up, so we can be done." My temper is very short when it comes to them. I lost it. I started yelling at him. "I wondered how you guys got done before me. I'm not cleaning this crap of yours." This started as a very heated yelling match between us and ended with us fighting. We were punching and kicking as we rolled on the floor. Wes hears the noise and comes to break us apart. Wes gets irritated at our feud and sternly says, "Are you guys trying to piss Mom off so early in the morning? We haven't even left yet, and you two are already fighting. Mom will change her mind if she hears this." We separate and glare at each other. Wes tells Leon to go get the mop bucket ready. After he leaves, Wes tells me to clean up the floor in the same way Leon had just done. I bite my tongue as my temper flares once again. I glared at him and stomped towards our parents' room. As I'm walking through the laundry room, Leon comes out of the bathroom and we collide, spilling the bucket all over us in the floor. I try to apologize, but I'm shoved to the floor again, so we are now back to fighting again. Wes couldn't stop us in time when our mother also comes in. "What the hell is going on here?" she screams. We all freeze in place. Leon quickly says, "She made the mess, Mom. We were waiting for her to finish cleaning the floor so we could mop, and she's taking forever. We told her to hurry up, but she refused to." I get the evil mother death glare. I quickly replied, "No, Mommy, that isn't what happened. They swept their garbage and dirt into the living room and wanted me to clean it up. I was just coming to tell you what they did when I bumped into Leon and caused the bucket to spill. So, I didn't make this mess on purpose." I know by this point she's about to explode, and I prepare myself. But it doesn't happen. She looks at all of us and takes a long, deep breath before saying, "Boys, you clean up your garbage in the living room, and B, you clean up the laundry room. Hurry up, or I'm canceling going anywhere today." she walks back to her room and leaves us to finish the cleanup. We finally finish the chores and head to the lake. This lake we went to is surrounded by pine trees, and the water is so murky you can't see the bottom of the lake. There's a dock set up 50 yards from the beach. The ground is very rocky and has pine needles and cones all over. They say the lake is bottomless and is connected to other bodies of water through underwater caves. There are numerous stories of the lake, but at the time, I was too young and wasn't aware of this. Being as we have swum here tons of times, nothing seemed different. The day went by without any issues. We swam almost the whole day away, diving off the dock, playing games on and under it, and sunbathing. As the sun went behind the hill and was beginning to set, our mom called us and said it was time to go home. I'm not a strong swimmer at all. No one really taught me how to swim, so I basically swim like a frog above and below the water. We all dove off the dock underwater and swam towards the shore. I didn't make it very far when something grabbed my ankle. The feeling of an ice-cold hand wrapped around my ankle and instantly chilled my whole body to the bone, even in the warm water. I shook my ankle a little, thinking one of my brothers was trying to mess with me. Its hold was really strong, like a vice. I began to panic as I struggled upwards to break the water's surface for help. This thing that had a hold of me pulled me down deeper where the water was getting colder. I knew if I didn't get free from whatever held me, I wasn't going to make it, as I was running out of oxygen. My lungs began to burn from lack of air. I thought that I was going to die, and maybe they wouldn't find my body. I mustered what I had left and started thrashing my limbs frantically. I had to get free no matter what, or go down fighting at the very least. Finally, the cold hand let me go, and I scrambled to the fresh air above. Once I broke the surface, I swam as fast as I could to land. When I was finally able to feel earth under my feet, I rushed onto the beach, coughing and gasping for air. I stood bent over with my hands on my thighs as I recovered. Then I turned towards the water and just stared at the lake and shivered at my experience. I turned back to see both of my brothers walking back from the truck, already eating sandwiches and drinking pop. I don't know how long the whole ordeal lasted under the water. I don't know what the hell that thing was that had grabbed me. But one thing is for certain, though. It definitely wasn't either of them. The Ghoul in the Woods, from Anonymous. I have always been a more sensitive person and have spent most of my 22 years of life seeing or sensing things most people don't. That being said, I've had a lot of supernatural experiences. But this one has stuck with me because of how clear the memory is. I lived in a little town in Maryland, right on the border with Virginia and West Virginia. My town was very old, established in the 1700s. It was originally established right on the banks of the Potomac River. Back in the day, a lot of people drowned whenever the river flooded, so the woods surrounding the river were considered by some to be haunted. Anyway, it was summer break, and being the raging insomniac I always enjoyed summer break because I could stay out later than normal. This incident, however, took place when I wasn't allowed to be out. On this night, I stayed out late, came home, and then spent a couple hours tossing and turning, trying to sleep. Finally, around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and decided to sneak out and walk around the woods. Like I said before, I had my share of creepy experiences, but I had never had any in the woods up to this point. So I slipped out the back door, went down the street, across the train tracks, and into the woods. Now there are lots of other reasons why a 15-year-old girl shouldn't be wandering those woods at night. There were junkies that frequented the area, as well as other less than reputable characters. But I was dumb and not the type to scare easy. I had my trusty knife in my jacket pocket, as well as my phone and my iPod, as I loved listening to music. As I walked through the woods, I stayed off the path and kept the hood of my jacket up, as to draw as little attention to myself as possible. No one ever bothered me there. I decided to walk through a part of the woods that I frequented during the day, but hadn't explored during the night. There was a tiny clearing there, with the foundation of an old building. I always assumed it was a house, as well as an old log I liked to sit on. As I entered the area, I felt something off, like I wasn't alone. I took one of my earbuds out and cautiously continued forward, more curious than frightened. Whatever else was there didn't feel human, so I thought it might be some kind of animal and wanted to see what it was. As I crept toward the edge of the clearing and peeked through the trees, I saw something that made my heart stop. There was a figure. At first, I thought it was a human on all fours, but then I noticed the way it moved. It was slightly jerky motion, and its bone structure looked weird. Its legs were long, kind of shaped like a dog's. Its arms were also long but more human than canine, and it had impossibly long claw-like fingers. Its skin was grayish-white, and it was very skinny. I could see its bones showing through its skin. Yet, somehow it looked strong, like if it got a hold of me, it could snap me in half without issue. It was wandering around the building, foundation, like it was looking for something. I saw a backpack lying nearby. It looked like it had been torn to shreds by whatever this thing was, and with the moonlight filtering through the trees, I could tell it was covered in stains that looked like blood. I could tell it hadn't noticed me yet, as its face was looking the other way, and I didn't want it to see me. Whatever this thing was, it was bad news. I slowly started to back away when a slight breeze blew from behind me. Suddenly, the creature stopped and stood still for a moment. It appeared to be sniffing the air. I kept backing away slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the thing before me. It slowly started to turn its head toward me, and that was when I saw its face. It looked humanish, but its jaw was more pronounced and looked larger than a normal human. It had very thin lips and very jagged, sharp, and yet human-like teeth. But its eyes were the worst. They were bigger than those of a human, and they were black. A kind of black that seemed to suck all light into it. And it had a crazed look to it. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it had this starved look in its eyes, like it would devour anything within reach. I couldn't scream. I could barely move. The thing then gave this low, guttural growl that got louder and higher, pitched until it became an inhuman shriek. I had never heard anything like it before or since. It pierced my eardrums. That was all I needed. I turned and bolted, headed straight for the path. I was a track and cross-country runner back then, and was more than fast when my adrenaline hit. But I didn't look back because I knew if I did, that thing would catch me. I could hear it crashing around behind me, and could tell by the sound it was on all fours. I was barely staying ahead of it when I burst through the tree line onto the trail, and promptly crashed into someone. It was a man. He had a scraggly brown beard, a red hat, and the distinct smell and appearance of someone who had been living outdoors for a while. He starts asking me if I was okay, what was wrong. And then he looked over my shoulder, and all the color drained from his face. He screamed, and the creature turned its attention to the man. I took this opportunity to pull myself back to my feet and ran. I could hear the man screaming behind me, but couldn't hear the creature following. I refused to look back and didn't stop running until I made it the 1.5 miles back home. I shut the door, locked it, and ran around the house, making sure the windows and front door were locked and the blinds were closed. I ran to my room and hid under the covers and cried. I wondered what happened to the man and what that thing was. Eventually, I dropped off to sleep, I assume from exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, my phone, knife, and iPod were gone. I guess I lost them while trying to escape. 2 days later, I saw something in the paper. The police had found a man matching the description of the man I had run into, who they said had been attacked by a wild dog or possibly coyote. He was alive when they found him, but barely. He was rushed to the hospital, and the paper clipping included that he was being treated for an unknown mental disorder as well, and warned parents to keep a close eye on their kids. I can only assume what he might have said for them to think that. To this day, I wonder what happened to him after that. I still feel guilty for basically leading the creature right to him, but something in me knows that if I hadn't crossed paths with him, I wouldn't be alive today. Following that night, and for several years after, I avoided those woods, even during the day, until I eventually moved across the country. I told this story to a few of my friends. Most of them laughed it off. I described the creature as a ghoul because I couldn't think of a better word at the time. Since then, I've heard stories of creatures with similar appearances, and I think I might have come face to face with a Wendigo. I obviously can't be completely sure what it was, and part of me hopes I never find out. That ghoul, and the screams of the man, and the sound of that inhuman growling shriek still haunt my nightmares, even now, though it's been 7 years since that happened. It's not something I can ever forget. Thanks for stopping by our little campsite here at Outdoor Terrors. To hear your story on the show, send it to us at darkstories.org. For more scary stories from me, catch me on my other podcasts, Unexplained Encounters and Tales from the Break Room, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Or go to eeriecast.com for those and even more terrifying podcasts. Follow me on X or Twitter at prevails, and if you don't mind, leave a rating for Outdoor Terrors on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Till next time, I'll see you soon when the campfire blazes once again.